fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty hi-yo silver, the Lone Ranger. With his faithful Indian companion Tonto, the daring and resourceful masked rider of the plains led the fight for law and order in the early western United States. Nowhere in the pages of history can one find a greater champion of justice. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. From out of the past come the thundering hoofbeats of the great horse Silver. The Lone Ranger rides again.
Come on, Silver. Let's go, big fella. I'll Silver. Aye!
The Lone Ranger and his Indian companion Tonto had made camp for the night in the hills outside of Stockton. The Lone Ranger was the first to awaken from a deep sleep when the horses whinnied loudly and heavy strangling smoke rolled through their camp.
Tonto. Wasabi. And the smoke. Big flame back in woods.
Quick, we'll saddle the horses and get away from here while we can. Steady, Silver, steady.
Scout, easy.
Quickly, the masked man and Indian saddled Silver and Scout. By the time they had finished, the fire had gained much headway.
Wasabi. Fire moving in on three sides. You'd be trapped.
We must get out. The creek. We'll try following that through the blazing woods. Come on, Silver.
Come on, Scout.
Easy, Silver, easy.
Scout, easy, fella.
The Lone Ranger and Tonto urged the frightened horses along the stream in the oppressive heat through the canyon of flames. Finally, they left the Holocaust behind them and stopped.
Oh, Silver. Oh, easy, steady, big fella.
Easy, Scout, easy, fella.
We're fortunate to get out of that alive, Tonto.
Me think we not get through.
Silver and Scout brought us through in spite of their fear. Good work, Silver, old fella. Good work.
Scout, you do plenty good, too.
The fire encircled our camp as if it had been deliberately started from all sides.
That's right.
We'll investigate the rim of the burned area. The sun is coming up, so it's light enough for us to see if there are any tracks. All right, let's go. Easy, steady, big fella.
Easy, fella.
Come on, Silver.
Come on, Scout.
The masked man and Indian rode around the expansive charred area until finally Tonto pointed to the ground, saying,
Look, Wasabi. Marks, Indian ponies.
Oh, Silver, oh.
Oh, Scout, oh, fella. Oh.
I also see the hoof marks of 2 or 3 shod horses, Tonto. There are others besides Indians here.
That's right.
They must have been seen making camp. For some reason, they tried to burn us out.
Maybe them think we get caught in fire.
Yes, otherwise they wouldn't have left.
What we do?
We'll trail those hoof marks. Come on, Silver.
Get 'em up, Scout.
The Lone Ranger and Tonto followed the hoof marks for some distance.
Oh, fella.
Finally, they stopped on a wooded ridge from which a narrow, steep trail led to an Indian village in the valley below.
Steady, easy, big fella.
Scout, easy, fella.
The two men cautiously approached the top of the ridge. Using binoculars, they studied the village. Then Tonto spoke.
That Comanche village, Kimasabi. Me see plenty braves.
Smoke signals are rising from the hilltops across from here.
Them send signals to other tribes, come for big powwow. And look, Kimasabi, two riders going along valley from village. And them white men.
They may have been with the Indians who started the fire at our camp.
Them riding a long trail to town.
We'll go to the end of the valley and pick up their trail. They may be the men who are rousing the Comanches. If not, they may lead us to the man or men responsible. All right, let's go.
Easy, Scout, easy, fella.
Come on, Silver.
Get 'em up, Scout.
Later, the two men who had ridden from the Comanche village entered the office of Bruce Lackey, known in town as a land agent.
Well, I've been waiting for you men to come back. What happened? Did you spot the masked man and Indian you told me about last night?
Yeah, Bruce. That masked man and his Indian pal won't bother you. Jake and I saw to that, didn't we, Jake?
Yeah.
That's right.
What'd you do?
We got the help of a few Comanches. And just before dawn, we started fires around their camp. They didn't have a chance to get away.
You were sure of that?
Yeah. The brush and trees out there were dry, burned like tinder. There was only one open lane of escape, and we watched there in case they made a break. But the fire closed in fast.
Mel's right. It was a regular inferno in no time.
You sure managed to get those Comanches riled up, boss.
I told the chief the townsmen were going to ask the government to drive them out of the valley so settlers could have the land. That started things.
The townsmen know the Indians are restless. They have men guarding the west side of town, expecting that if an attack comes, it'll come from that direction.
My plan is to have the Comanches gradually gather throughout the night on the east side of town. Then at dawn, move in across the railroad tracks, taking the entire place by surprise. We'll join the chief just before dawn and tell him what to do.
When the Lone Ranger and Tonto reached the edge of town, the masked man waited in a grove, while Tonto went on foot to try to find out more about the two men they had trailed. Before long, Tonto returned.
What did you find out, Tonto?
Me lose trail on Main Street, Kimasabi. Too many other tracks. Me not find out where two men go.
Well, we do know the Comanches are gathering and may go on the warpath soon.
That's right.
I think the wise thing to do is for you to ride to Fort Davis, 20 miles from here, and advise Major Lewis of the situation. He'll remember you. You'll have plenty of time to send troopers to protect the town. While you're gone, I'll do all I can to find out who's behind this unrest among the Comanches.
After Tonto left, the Lone Ranger spent some time disguising his features so he could enter town without his mask. Finally satisfied with the result, he left Silver hidden in the grove and walked into town to the sheriff's office.
Good morning, Sheriff.
Morning, stranger. What can I do for you?
I brought this letter to identify me.
Oh? We appreciate it. Well, and signed by the governor, This mentions that you're a masked man, mister.
I couldn't come into town wearing the mask, but I have it here. See, I've disguised my features.
You have a companion.
Yes, my Indian friend Tonto. He rides a paint, and I ride a white stallion named Silver.
That's enough for me, mister. Mighty glad to see you. Here's your letter.
Oh, thanks.
Now, sit down and tell me what brings you here.
Briefly, the Lone Ranger told the sheriff what had happened early that morning. When he finished, the sheriff spoke angrily.
By thunder, if we could get our hands on the hombres who were riling up the Comanches, we'd be able to forestall the attack.
It may be too late for that. I feel certain an attack will be made, perhaps within another 24 hours.
In that case, we'd better send for troopers.
Tonto has already gone to Fort Davis.
Good. I'll pass out the word for the townsmen to be ready. The Comanche village is to the west, so I figure that's the direction they'll move in on the town if they attack.
Well, that seems logical, but it's best to be sure. I'll do some scouting and try to keep track of their movements.
Tonto headed southwest toward Fort Davis. For a short distance, he followed the trail. Then, deciding to take a shortcut, he started across the plains.
Get him up, Scout!
The big paint horse raced over the plains at a gallop. Suddenly, one of his forefeet sank into a hole made by a prairie dog. As his horse stumbled unexpectedly, Tonto was thrown from the saddle, striking his head a glancing blow on a rock. Scout stopped, then slowly walked to his master. He nuzzled the still form a moment, then whinnied anxiously. But Tonto lay without moving under the blazing sun, and his paint horse stood patiently beside him. The curtain falls on the first act of our Lone Ranger adventure. Before the next exciting scenes, please permit us to pause for just a few moments. Continue. For some time after being thrown, Tonto lay without moving. Then, with a groan, he sat up, holding his head.
Head hurt plenty. Me hot. Thirsty. Need water.
Slowly, the Indian got to his feet, a puzzled expression on his usually stoic face. Then, staggering slightly, he walked slowly to a nearby stream. Then, lying prone on the bank, sipped the cool water. Then he bathed his face and head before rolling to his back. Within a few moments, he fell into a deep sleep. Darkness had fallen, and a bright moon shone when Tonto awoke.
Nighttime. Do not understand. How we get here, Scout? We start to fort in morning.
Slowly, Tonto got to his feet. His thoughts were still confused. Then, with sudden and startling clarity, he remembered.
Oh, now me remember. Me start to get troopers. Scout stumble. That it. And me get bumping head. We lose much time, Scout. Still long way from fort. We go fast, Scout. Fast. Get 'em up, Scout.
That night, the Lone Ranger had scouted through the hills, but found that the situation hadn't changed. From past experience, he knew that Indians usually attacked at dawn. He decided to wait in the grove near town for Tonto to return. He spent several restless hours waiting. Then, though concerned because his friend hadn't come back, he mounted Silver and rode toward the Indian village to learn the latest developments.
Silver! Oh, easy. Steady now.
The moon was very bright, and when he reached the ridge, he left Silver among the trees and moved forward on foot to look down upon the Comanche village.
Oh, war dance. It means they're getting ready to attack the town. I'll wait until they start to lead, and I'll ride ahead and give the warning.
As the Lone Ranger intently watched the Indians in the valley below, a savage figure in war paint moved from the shadows behind him. Silver's warning whinny came too late.
What? You not move.
In the bright moonlight, the Lone Ranger saw the Indian holding a gun. He quickly raised his hands.
You took me by surprise.
You spy on village. Me take you, chief. You keep hands up. Go down narrow trail, valley.
What about my horse?
Me lead 'em horse. Me move back, get horse. You walk slow.
The Indian backed slowly, and the Lone Ranger moved forward, still facing the gun. When the Indian reached Silver and groped behind him with his free hand for the trailing rein, the Lone Ranger suddenly spoke.
Now, Silver!
The big stallion jumped forward, knocking the Indian in the back, sending him sprawling to the ground.
I'll take your gun. There. Good work, Silver.
Quickly, the Lone Ranger picked up the Indian's gun, then said,
Roll over on your stomach. Put your hand behind your back.
Soon the Indian was bound and gagged. Then the Lone Ranger heard a sound that indicated the Comanches were ready to move.
They're getting ready to leave. They're riding out the other end of the valley. They must not plan to attack from the west side of town. We'll have to find out. Come on, Silver.
The Lone Ranger left the ridge and, from a distance, watched the savages approach the town from the east. He immediately started at top speed to reach Stockton before them.
Faster, big fellow, faster. Come on, Silver!
The Lone Ranger soon reached the edge of town and realized he wouldn't have time to warn the townsmen who were waiting on the west side of town. As he passed the stockyards, he noticed a line of cattle cars with engine attached and with steam up. The engineer looked in surprise as he stopped beside the engine.
Oh, Silver, oh, easy, steady, big fella. The Indians are coming from the east. They're almost here.
What?
The railroad tracks cross the streets into town. Start the train and use it as a barrier.
Indians, you say?
Yes, hurry. Move these cars along the track so they bar the way into town. That will delay them.
Not me, mister. I'm leaving right now.
Easy, steady, big fella. All right, I'll start it myself.
The Lone Ranger quickly entered the engine cab, pulled the throttle, and started the long string of empty cattle cars along the tracks. The great horse Silver followed alongside the engine. As the train of cars rolled over the tracks, the Lone Ranger could see the Comanches approaching as he moved the cars into position across the main road into Stockton, and then stopped them to form a barrier.
That will disorganize them for a few moments, and they'll come around each end of the train. Now, big fella. Come on, Silver!
When the Indians reached the barrier, they stopped.
Don't let this stop us. Chief, you lead part of your braves toward the engine. We'll lead the rest to the other end of the cars.
And not time!
Get up there!
Meanwhile, the Lone Ranger reached the west side of town where the sheriff was waiting with the townsmen.
Oh, Silver! Oh! Sheriff, the Indians are coming in from the east.
They'll burn the town.
Where's some?
I stopped a train of cattle cars across the roads into town. That will delay them a short time. Hurry, you may have a chance to hold them off while they're disorganized.
All right, come on, everybody. Get up there.
Come on, Silver!
The townsmen raced through town to head off the Comanches. When they reached the tracks, they could see some of the savages coming around each end of the train.
Oh, easy, steady. Take the cover and concentrate your fire toward the ends of the train.
Right, mister. Let's go, boys.
For a short time, the townsmen managed to hold back the Indians as they came around the string of cattle cars. But soon the Lone Ranger realized they were fighting a losing battle. The townsmen, firing from every conceivable point of cover, were unable to hold back the horde. Then...
Sheriff, look, coming in from the west.
Coming down Main Street. Troopers coming, men!
The troopers rode quickly to the scene and entered the fray.
Whoa! I sent 2 detachments to circle the town and get behind them. We heard the battle as we approached.
Good. Oh, look, 3 white men coming around the end of the train. We want them.
Right. Get those 3 men!
Several of the troopers, obeying the major's order, moved in on Bruce Lackey and his 2 gunmen. Meanwhile, the Comanches, suddenly beset from the rear and stopped by the troopers and townsmen in front, broke ranks and tried to escape. Before long, most of those who were not wounded were rounded up, and the battle ended. Later, at the sheriff's office, the Lone Ranger and Tonto stood with the sheriff, the major, and others, facing the three men responsible for the uprising. The major was saying,
Tonto reached us just in time.
Me have trouble on way, Kimasabi. Scout stumble. Me fall.
What?
Hit head on rock. Me lose plenty time. First, me not remember. But when it get dark, me know me must get troops.
Tonto, I was worried. Are you all right now?
Me all right.
These three men ought to hang for what they did.
Hold them for trial, Sheriff. It's a serious crime to incite Indians to an uprising.
We can thank the masked man and Indian for saving the town.
Marshman.
Yes, perhaps I'll look more familiar to you if I wear this.
Hey, he is the masked man. And that's the Indian rides with him. I thought they were...
You thought we died in that inferno you started at our camp.
Well, they'll get another charge against them for attempted murder, mister.
You fool should have made sure before...
Shut up, you. If I didn't know you'll be properly punished, I'd beat you to a pulp. We'll wait outside and ride with you, Major. Adios, Sheriff. Come on, Tonto.
Adios.
From the look in his eyes, lackey, I'd say you're lucky you're in custody of the law.
Oh, shut it.
That's right. Lackey, you made the mistake of trying to pull a fast one on the masked man and Indian. Now, he'll do anything to help anyone who needs it. But let me tell you, when a polecat like you crosses the path of the Lone Ranger, he better look out.
Hey, doggone you, Mel. You told me about a masked man, but you never did say that he's the Lone Ranger.
This is a feature of the Lone Ranger Incorporated, created by George W. Trendle, produced by Trendle Campbell Muir Incorporated, directed by Charles D. Livingston, and edited by Fran Stryker. The part of the Lone Ranger is played by Brace Beamer.